what do you do most of the time in Wizards of Legends? I took notes on one of my games to find out. My time spent from booting up the game to the end was about 37 minutes and 43 seconds. I divided this game into several different categories, and here are my results. As we had all hoped, the first thing on Wizards of Legends' nutrition label is fighting. 16 minutes and 54 seconds of my playtime, or 45%, was actually firing spells and dodging attacks. 65% of that time is toying with enemies at 11 minutes and 3 seconds, and 35% of that time is slaying spooky bosses, or 5 minutes and 51 seconds. Number 2 on our list is sadly the cornmeal of video games. I'm talking about walking. 40% of my time, or 15 minutes, was just walking to the next fight or shop. I personally just use walking and running because it's easier on my fingers, but those with more will than me can set their hands to turbo and traverse the empty abyss faster with blink dashing. Shopping will be the next thing on our list, coming in at 9% of our time, or 3 minutes 18 seconds. I think this percentage will differ a lot from player to player. Many of my shop visits only lasted around 4 seconds. However, my longest shop visit was 33 seconds, when I needed to look up a guide for one item in particular. With 3 to 5 items in a shop, some people may spend a much larger time looking up and deciding what to buy. Now we're down to our last 6% of the game, 3% of which is going to be the ending and skipping the credits. I don't imagine anyone's watching those credits. This next one makes me happy, as only 2%, or 48 seconds of time, is spent loading the game, then 1%, or 26 seconds, is spent in the beginning area. This time will probably differ the most, as this is where you can buy and equip spells, relics, and cloaks. I just happened to know what I wanted. And a whooping 0.1%, or 3 seconds of your time, will be spent in the first menu of the game. All in all, I'm pretty happy with the percents. The 40% walking is a bit of a pain, and I think you can feel it while you're playing. Like, things aren't quite progressing as quickly as you want them to. But fighting is number 1, so let's talk about that a little bit more. Of my 69 fights, 59 of them consisted of enemies and 10 of bosses, an 86-14 split. Time-wise, however, the split was 65-35, so expect bosses to take a little bit longer than your average enemy. They will also be dishing out more than your average enemy, as I mean a 57.8 damage taken per boss, and only 4 damage per enemy. In other words, every 14 enemies could be considered one boss in this run. And even though I was trying to avoid how bad I am, I must mention I took 1,809 damage through my run. With my base health being 500, I should have died 3.6 times, if not for the healing received. 1,231, or 68% of my damage taken from enemies, and 578 damage, or 32% taken from bosses. So you may ask, which is more deadly? Well, bosses did 1.65 damage per second, and enemies did 1.85 damage per second, so enemies seemed to be doing more damage and damage faster overall. Of my 63 sources of damage taken, what bosses or enemies caused me the most trouble? Of the bosses, the 3rd section Earth boss was the most at 240. I always hated his pillar walls, and me being hit by them 5 times in this run shows why. Next would be the last boss at 100 damage from his first form. This is a pretty good run for me, as I usually die on the last boss. Third is the 2nd section fire at 35 damage, and I would not take any damage from the 1st section frost boss or 2nd form of the last boss. In terms of enemies, the Lance Boy would be my regretty, with 175 damage, which is fairly understandable. These enemies are frequent and obnoxious, especially when you just want to punch them with your earth fists. Pits may not be considered an enemy and more of an environmental hazard, but they dealt 150 damage to me. Zombies would come next to my surprise at 145. All they do is run at you, but I suppose they come in packs. The next two, Earth Archer and Fire Knight, at 120 and 101, I would like to say did their damage in one room. I believe they have the highest burst potential of all the enemies. The last few in order will be Burst Mage at 100, the remaining Sword, Slime, Stomper, Ice Mage, Fire, the environmental object, Assassin, and Ice Assassin all doing less than 50. One last thing I would like to mention is that every fight would not be equal. Of my 69 fights, 10 of them would cause 1011 damage, or 55% of the total damage taken. This is typically caused by enemies comboing you to oblivion. I'm not saying it's unfair, but prepare to feel like you are doing great for the majority of the game, only to lose a large portion of your health in a short amount of time. It can be a little frustrating. Overall, these are just some interesting figures I thought I could share. It's difficult to keep track of these things while you play, but when recorded, all is laid bare. Overall, I think Wizards is a good game, and though it can feel a little slow and frustrating at times, fighting and cool builds are the mainstay. Cast on, my fellow dudes.